Hey, what's up? It's Fonz. I want to ask the Fonz. This is my first ever live stream, and I'm super excited to do it on House of the Dragon Season 1, based off of my Fonz's Favorite Frames edition. So basically, what I'll be doing for this Fonz's Favorite Frames is I'll be taking a scene in, let's say, a TV show or a movie, break down the editing, or tell you which scene is my favorite one, and then I'll be breaking down why it's my favorite scene and why you should study film editing for it, and literally go through step by step, or not step by step, but like break down each little nuance or each little detail about why it was very challenging to edit, or why it could be something to study for. So the first live edition that I'm doing here for YouTube is House of the Dragon Season 1. Just a heads up, of course, there are spoilers in this that I want you guys to know about. It's not going to be from episode 1, it's going to be from episode 5, so please make sure you watch through it all so that you can understand the context of the story, and also obviously any spoilers that you might not want to know about. So yeah, let's begin. I'm gonna roll my little titles here like I do for every video, and we'll get right to it. All right, let's do it. Fonz's Favorite Frames, House of the Dragon Season 1. So yeah, again, spoilers. There's a spoiler alert for episode 5, We Light the Way. Just letting you know that the editor that edited this episode, his name is Crispin Green. If you'd like to also follow along, or I have it up on my blog, but if you want to read other favorite frames that I have them on my blog. So I'm just going to use this as a guideline because I have everything sort of laid out pretty well here, so that we can go through it as I wrote it and as I basically broke it down. So let's get right into it. Fonz's Favorite Frames. If there was one scene to study film editing for in House of Dragon Season 1, it would be, drumroll reveal, Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding. This scene was just incredibly well edited. I don't know, the amount of story structure, the amount of homework that Crispin had to do in order to get this right was pretty magnificent. It was pretty excellent. If you ever want to see really good performance-based editing, as far as like reactions or close-ups or looks, or just in general how he was able to tell a story without them having to say anything, this scene is what I really loved about that. We always think about editing as like fast-paced action sequences, or fast-paced montages, or when the editing is super upfront with us, we always think that that's great editing, which it is amazing editing. But for something like this, we never really appreciate the editing, and why it's so impactful when we watch it, or why it's so just well assembled in a timeline. So I think Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding, that the pre-wedding feast, from all the way when all the clans walk in to literally the end of the episode. I think it's about 20 minutes. I think I wrote, about full 20-minute episode here. So that's something to watch out for, especially when we always think about editing as fast-paced or just in-your-face kind of things. So let's get into it. The 5 backstories to keep in mind here are Sir Christian Cole's secret relationship with Rhaenyra, Laenor's secret relationship with Joffrey Lonmouth, and then Queen Alicent's coming of age arc and becoming a player in this politics of power, and then King Viserys' ailment and his relationship with his wife, Queen Alicent. And then the last one is Prince Daemon's secret relationship with Rhaenyra, and then lying about, killing his current wife, Rhea, in order to be with Rhaenyra. Just let's go over some context first before we go into the editing of like what this whole scene is about, because that's actually really important to the editing, and why Crispin edited it that way. Basically, there's a whole feast to celebrate Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding. As you know, through politics, Rhaenyra obviously doesn't want to marry Laenor, and Laenor doesn't really want to marry Rhaenyra, but they have this secret agreement that if they get married and follow their parents' orders, they can still have their side pieces, and basically happy days, right? But not so fast. Because those side pieces are not necessarily happy with what they encounter in this banquet. So before the feast kicks off, King Viserys makes a toast, and midway through the speech, King Alicent dresses in war green. So the second part of this equation is the King Viserys' relationship with his queen, and she basically is now, if you watch the previous episodes, it's been building up to this, where she basically is now this super changed woman, who's now making a chase for the throne, right? Like, she wants to be now the leader of the Seven Kingdoms. But so now this whole scene is pivotal because she's, wearing this war green color that everyone symbolizes conflict and, bringing about war. So this is a really, it's a second layer to this scene, because now we have, Rhaenyra and Laenor's secret agreement, plus King Viserys' relationship with, Queen Alicent, and her now becoming this, like, power player in the realm of the politics. So I wrote about how she basically is now, green is the color that high towers fly when they're going to war. Something is up, right? So more context. The first half of the pre-wedding feast is full of toast, dance, and food, and obviously there's a lot of it. There's this really cool, like, shot of the banquet where it, like, moves left and right, or it's, I think, quick close-ups. Just a lot of food. Lots of food. I'd love to be digging in on some of those food. All right, so when things start to slowly, move forward in the scene, we all know about the side pieces agreements. Like, basically, we know in episode 4, Rhaenyra and Laenor make the agreement, and now, Christian Cole, who is Rhaenyra's side piece, is a little bit more featured when when this, part of the equation becomes a little bit more apparent. So when Laenor is greeted by Rhaenyra, when he walks in, and she, basically gives him a kiss and a hug, I love how Crispin cuts to Christian Cole's face. It's like we know something that, they know. It's like it's basically we're waiting for something to build up, right? We're waiting for a conflict to happen. Like, we don't know how Christian Cole's going to react to this in the long term. In the short term, he clearly isn't really happy about it. So we're really in this mind sort of game. So yeah, I love how Crispin really actually, shows his reaction. And then not only that, he also shows Jeffrey Lonmouth's reaction. So it's this cool, like, we get to see everyone's sort of place in this whole situation. But anyway, so that's the second part of, or the main part of the scene. And then we go into Prince Daemon now, whose long-term goal is to basically be with Rhaenyra, which is very interesting enough. So, but he has a wife, that prevents him from marrying Rhaenyra and riding off into the sunset. So if you watch previous episodes, he basically kills her, and now tries to hide it. He's trying to like dismiss it, and the wife's cousin Rhea confronts Prince Daemon, saying like, why'd you kill my cousin, blah blah blah. And Daemon sort of flips the table on him and says, he didn't do it, but he's now looking for his share of the inheritance because he was the husband. And then the whole thing kind of keeps going, and the editing, if you really watch it, the editing sort of matches the energy of like the scene, so it becomes actually really fun to watch, and you're basically like watching like real-time editing. Like the editing matches the energy, and it just keeps on going with how with how the story kind of moves along, which I really loved. That's something you don't really kind of catch when you're basically when you're watching it for not as an audience. You're just kind of just enjoying it and ingesting it. But if you rewatch the scene, the editing kind of matches like the pacing of everything, which is great. I love that. That's just unnoticeable. So then the big reveal comes, and in the scene you have a lot of more dancing, a lot more of these like really cool dances. Honestly, they're like very like Westerosian, I guess you can say. But so you have all these dances, and all of a sudden a fight breaks out. And in previous season or previous episodes, it's always Daemon. Prince Daemon is sort of like the ominous figure. Like we're now like, oh, it's got to be Prince Daemon, right? It's got to be him again. It's got to be he started something, because he basically was just talking to Rhaenyra, and now he's doing something to stir up the crowd. It's just like, oh, it's always him, but it's not. And the editing forces us to think that way, which is very interesting. I'll go over that later, but the way that it's edited kind of puts us in confusion too, because usually when we edit a fight, you see almost you kind of see everything all at once, right? Like if there's a fight that breaks out, it's like you see a couple of reactions, and then like you see what happened. But the way that Crispin edited this was pretty awesome. It was kind of cool, where he basically hides it for a good 20 seconds, I think. He hides like what was happening, and you kind of just see the reactions, and you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on, and that's basically, as an audience member, you're like kind of confused at what's happening, and which is great, and that's what you wanted out of that. So it turns out that Sir Christian Cole was actually the cause of the fight, and was found bashing Laenor's head to the ground, killing him, and what was supposed to be a happy celebratory pre-wedding feast is now turned into a bloodbath, as every Game of Thrones weddings always ends up in. So that was what I think sealed the deal for me as far as the editing goes. The way that he approached just the confusion part, the confusion and the build-up to getting us through the end here. I think that was like, okay, this is a high candidate for for film editing. I wouldn't be surprised if he won the Emmy for this, by the way. We'll see we'll see the nominations are, but this is a really good episode as far as film editing goes. And then at the end, you have King Viserys making a decision to marry Rhaenyra and Laenor right in there instead of waiting. And then he's kind of had enough. He's like, I don't want any more conflict. I'm done. Let's just get them wed and get this whole thing over with. And then to top it all off, he falls to the ground because of his sickness and his ailment. So there's a third, or whatever you can call it, fifth layer, I guess, to the scene. So there's so many things going on. so many layers of storylines over storylines. It's incredible to watch how Crispin really picks his performances and how they have to sort of include everything that's in the story. And that's why the context of the scene is important, because if you don't know your homework, if you don't do it, if you don't understand the performances or the story or what's supposed to happen, you're just going to get lost. I mean, this is very advanced stuff. Like, this isn't, put these two shots together and build a scene to make it look it's like there's so many more deeper meanings. Like, Game of Thrones is one of those shows where, like I said before, the performances or their dialogue, the characters' dialogue doesn't necessarily match their actions. It's not a show where they'll say one thing and they'll actually do it. It's like they're lying. Most of the times it's a lie. You don't ever believe what they're saying. You got to believe what they're doing. So that's kind of that's interesting to me, and I really love that about the way that he edited this. It's a lot of the performances are based off of that. It's really, really interesting to see. All right, let's move on to showing, not telling. All right, we're gonna break this down a little bit now. As far as what I guess breaking down the editing piece by piece versus just going through it all. And that's why I love this scene and why it's important to really understand how much it really takes to edit something like this. So showing, not telling. Really important to show reactions and point of view shots in the scene, because sometimes the dialogue doesn't matter, right? Like I just said, dialogue doesn't really matter. We're just more immersed into like the character's body language and subtle looks. Like even just like a small look for like a second is like extremely, extremely useful as an editor. And most of this, so this is sort of what I was saying here, is like he plays with a lot of the point of views and reaction shots. And if you rewatch the scene, I think there's like maybe like a good minute or so. I don't know. Actually, I have to rewatch it myself. But I know there's a long amount of time where it's just like straight up just like reaction. And it's very interesting because that's what House of the Dragon, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, that's what mostly it's all about. It's like these dealings or these secret motivations that these characters are, trying to achieve without, with lying and without saying anything. That's basically why it's so entertaining to us, That's what makes House of the Dragon so intriguing. We have to always look beyond what the characters are saying. I would say keep this in mind as far as like Crispin's editing and how he approaches it. I think that's very important. That's a huge part of how he actually approaches his editing. You always have to look beyond what the characters are saying. Cool. All right, let's break it down even more. So there's this part. Okay, there's this part when the beginning, when the clans are moving, or they're moving together, but they're walking in and being welcomed by Viserys and Rhaenyra, because they're at the front table, and Jason Lannister, who is this, he was a potential suitor for Rhaenyra not way back in the day, but a couple episodes back. And obviously he just kept getting rejected by her. She basically is just like, dude, move along. Like, we're never going to end up together. It's like never going to happen. But, in classic Jason Lannister style, he still continues to shoot a shot and does have a small scene here where he basically, he basically tries to, again, flirt with Rhaenyra and tries to, see if, I don't even know how he's going to do this, but break up this wedding, and tries to, it's like, it's a silly thing. But the funny part is, Rhaenyra is just like, oh god, here we go again. Incoming comment. What did I say? Here we go. Incoming comment about how he is a better fit to be my suitor, or my lack of ability to rule the Seven Kingdoms. Like, that's basically where she's at right now, right? She's just rolling her eyes even before he even says a word. You can see this in the scene. Like, she just basically rolls her eyes and just like, all right, here we go. What do you have for me now, Jason? So that's a really important performance, right? That's a really important distinction and a story point that Crispin had to make sure that we as an audience got. So that's why I wrote, these reactions are put in on purpose and extremely well thought out. Crispin didn't just happen to edit that in. He had to watch every single piece of the dailies and he had to choose this shot with Rhaenyra's look. There might have been a different shot where she probably would have been a little bit less, I don't know how you say, annoyed, and it might have not worked. It might have been a different emotion for us, right? It might have just been something not as strong as this. So that's huge, right? That's a really important editing choice, because that just by that one look, we can sort of break down the entire character arc of Rhaenyra and Jason Lannister. Like, just show this clip, just show this performance. But yeah, so I wrote down, it's a small detail, but this look actually sets the tone for their conversation. Rhaenyra clearly has bigger problems than dealing with Jason Lannister at this point, and she basically predicts what he's going to say, and she basically does. Yeah, like, it's the eye roll reaction, and he basically says exactly what's on her, what she thought he was going to say. So watch that for the editing there. I think that was a very good performance selection by Crispin. And then we get to the real meat of this scene, right? This is basically why we're watching this scene. And Rhaenyra and Laenor's secret agreement with their respective side pieces, like, this is where Crispin really needed to focus his attention on, because he needs to build this up. He needs to build this up because the ending requires us to feel like it was warranted. Right? Like, you can't just you can't just go into a fight where, Christian Cole just bashes Joffrey Lonmouth's head without us feeling like there was no buildup, right? So he has to add reaction shots, because they're not going to say it. Like, Christian Cole's not going to say, I don't agree with this agreement in the middle of this wedding. Like, he's not gonna, like, outwardly say this to Rhaenyra. We just watch how he reacts to it, and he does a great job. Crispin does a great job with this, because every single time that there's, like I said in the beginning, every single time that there is a mention of Rhaenyra and Laenor, we're gonna see a Christian Cole reaction, like, instantly, or just seconds after we see. It's always a reaction from Christian Cole. And it gets even crazier because Joffrey Lonmouth is this, like, bodyguard that also now wants to figure out who is Rhaenyra's side piece. Like, I want to meet the me on that side, kind of thing, right? So he's this, like, investigative, dude that basically, like, wants to figure out who this person is, and then obviously starts getting his his radar out, and then he actually does find who it is, and that even pisses Christian Cole off even more, because then now it's like, whoa, how did this get around? And now he feels like everyone knows, how did this guy find out that I was the side piece, kind of thing. So like I said before, when the Valerian family is introduced, Crispin makes sure that we see how jealous Christian Cole feels and how Joffrey Lonmouth feels. Actually, it's funny. This is such a funny shot right here. Crispin even sneaks in a shot of Jason Lannister in there as well. I said, haha, well played. That's so funny. Also, I want to just a little break here because I did download a cool little screen brush. I want to add some. Is it this? Yeah. I can do these like it'll disappear. These cool things. Arrow tool. Anyway. Alright, never mind. I have to figure out, but alright. I'll figure it out in a sec. But let's move on. Okay, so in typical Game of Thrones fashion, there are several storylines here at play. Crispin actually mixes in reaction shots that belong to different storylines, which is a risky editing move, but it plays so successfully here. This is very true. This is a very difficult thing to do as an editor, and it's kind of a bold move. It's not necessarily something I would probably recommend unless you know what you're doing, kind of thing. I just think that when you have 4 or 5 story, plot lines going on at the same time, you kind of want to stick to those plot lines to make sure the audience doesn't get lost. That's the whole point. Like, you don't want to make the audience, like, you don't want to lose the audience here, right? You're trying to make sure that when you watch something as an audience, you're ingesting it and you're not basically getting them confused, right? There are some movies or some TV shows sometimes that I'm watching, I'm like, what is going on? Like, what am I watching, right? Like, sometimes those happen, but then they answer it later on, which is, the whole point of it. But in this scenario, it's tricky because you're basically giving the question and then answering it sooner or later. Like, it's not you kind of just don't want to like jumble it all together. You kind of want to do it piece by piece is basically what I'm saying. But he does it so very successful here, which I am very impressed with. But there was a moment where when Rhaenyra and Laenor greet each other for the first time when they walk in, and then you see Viserys looking for Queen Alicent. And that's a different storyline, right? It's just like but it sort of intertwines. I think that's why it works. It interweaves with each other. Because it's semi part of each storyline. But yeah, so this sort of now introduces that second layer of the equation, right? Where the queen is now sort of, defying the power of King Viserys, and King Viserys feels like he's losing control over his queen, and now he kind of just like is this dud. He's like this dude without a queen, and now he's just like, well, can't control her. Now that means a lot, right? That kind of screams like, if you can't control your queen, how can you control the 7 kingdoms kind of thing? So that's basically another layer to that. And then the third layer to this is he starts coughing. He's now like he's now having to deal with this ailment, and it's another thing to add to the complex storylines that come in the scene. So that's it's what's it called? It's foreshadowing, right? It's foreshadowing a lot, and it's foreshadowing small nuances, small build-ups to the bigger build-up, which happens later at the end. So that's what I like about this scene. It really does have a good build-up, and then it like punches you right in the face at the end. The build-ups are really small and tiny, but other than that, it really does do a good job. Okay, so let me I'm really curious how this, yes, I got it. Got my little arrows. That's the only one I wanted. All right, so I got the little arrows. All right, let's do the next part. Okay, confirming that his health is worsening. I just talked about that, 2 additional storylines are at play, and it's done through subtle reactions. So we're all, again, this is still on the showing but don't telling part of the conversation, right? The breakdown that I'm trying to explain. Lots of reaction shots, lots of point of view shots. I can't unfortunately show the scene because I'm on YouTube, and you can totally watch the scene. I'll have it on the description down below so you can watch it. Or you can go to my blog as well and just press play there. Just to point out again, these reaction shots are well curated by Crispin in order to further the story at hand. He is not blatantly spoiling of what's to come next, but he is building us up for it. Yep, that's huge. It's a very, very important note to make. Next scene to observe this showing but not telling is when Queen Alicent is seemingly reborn and walks down the aisle implicitly defying King Viserys by interrupting his speech. So King Viserys decides to move forward with the banquet, and without the queen, she's just gonna show up whenever he shows up, or is just not gonna show up. So as he starts the speech, Queen Alicent actually shows up and stops the entire congregation and like walks down in this like green colored dress where like everyone's saying like, hey, what was the color again when the High Towers meant war? So then, the green symbolizes her defiance and war and rebellious nature that she is. So she's now kind of seemingly reborn, right? And she's not gonna be told what to do anymore. She's this new person. And editing wise, this is where Crispin shines. He makes a big deal out of this. If you rewatch the scene, if you go on YouTube and rewatch it, he really uses these also as an editor, you have to understand the cinematography of shots, like understand what placement of the camera and how the character is positioned amongst the environment. There's this really cool shot of the queen like walking up right before she walks in. Like you see her like silhouette behind her, or the camera's behind her, and you see a silhouette of her, and like everyone's in front of her, and you just see this like very like queenly or like leadershiply photo. It's this like really well done composition of her just like being in front of everyone, as if to like say that she's now the one to like be in power. And then there's also an over the head shot of her just like walking down, kind of just shows this like really dark tone of like kind of like a villain walking in, like basically like the whole congregation stops because of something villainous has entered, and like that's sort of the composition that it gave. And that's why I like this so much, why I like the scene so much, and the way that Crispin actually chose those shots instead of just like a dolly in front of her and like pushing back. Those matter. Those decisions matter, and for you to also have to understand as an editor, you have to understand what different compositions mean. And as a cinematographer, they have a whole list of meanings and why they shot it that way. And it gets into the whole art of it. You can't just like choose a wide shot because it just looks cool. There's a whole meaning to it, right? I mean, obviously there's like production limitations that you might have to run into, and it becomes very difficult to like have to sort through. And of course you're like sometimes locked into a wide shot because there's production problems that happen in a medium shot. But idealistically, if you had every shot that could work, you're going to want to pick the shots that have the most impactful meaning and reasons why you're cutting to them. So rewatch this scene. It's very, very solid editing as far as shot compositions and shot choices. And then we have another line here where Rhaenyra actually is involved when Queen Alicent walks up into the stage, I guess, or the table, and she basically now has like a secret that she knows that Rhaenyra basically lied to her, and there's the interweaving again, the interweaving of storylines where Crispin has to basically taken into consideration for, right? Now she has to make sure that the performances match what she's talking about. So it moves the story along. Rhaenyra knows something is up because literally all Queen Alicent said was, "Congratulations, stepdaughter. What a blessing this is for you." Like, that's not even, like, that line has nothing to do with, like, blaming Rhaenyra for lying. But the way that she said it, the way that she acted, and the way that she basically relayed the message to her, Rhaenyra knows something is up, because she would never say something like that, you know? Like, the way that she said it that way, and the way that she's reacted to, like, her being late to this banquet. So obviously Rhaenyra doesn't know the full truth, but she knows sort of that something is going on with Queen Alicent. Cool. All right, next is... I was just saying, we immediately think of fast cuts. For great editing, we immediately think of fast cuts, montage, purposeful cutaways that show off editing. However, molding and sculpting performances to the finest details is actually what makes great editing. It's very true. It's very true. It's the invisible art of editing that I think most people don't really see the excellence behind it, you know, and we always kind of just ingest it as we watch it, and that's it, right? We don't necessarily even notice that it's great editing, but once you actually think about it and break it down like I'm doing here, you'll really kind of appreciate it. Let's see. I go in here and explain a little bit about what's it called? Split screens. Like, obviously I'm not part of the crew. Like, I'm not an assistant or an editor on this show, but I know they have a lot of visual effects, and if you believe it or not, some VFX are invisible, meaning that you won't ever know that they're visual effect shots because they will hide it. So like a split screen, if you don't know what a split screen is, it's basically, it's not the traditional split screen where you can see a split screen, but basically it's when the editor says, hey, I actually like character A's take one performance and character B's take two performance. Obviously they're not in the same take, so they'll have to mesh it together so that they're basically in the same, they look like they're in the same take, you know? So it goes that far into, you know, picking the right performances. You know, you have to really pay attention to that. You know, as an editor, you want, let's say, a look from Rhaenyra at that scene at the table, but you wanted take 3 of Queen Alicent's look at the scene at the table. So now VFX is, you know, you call the VFX department and say, hey, can we make this a shot? You know, I'd love for these two characters to have these two performances in the same take, or act like it's in the same take. So that's how far editing can go. You know, we want to mold and sculpt performances to the finest details, you know, because any look or any reaction is crucial to getting the right emotion out of a story. All right, so the second half of the wedding kicks off, and its central focus is this Westerosian dance, which, again, I mean, this is kind of brilliant editing in itself. Well, the energy kicks up. The way that they actually, you know, cut through with the dance is actually pretty awesome. There's so many cool shots of it, like, you know, the way that they move and then the way that camera weaves through the action. It's incredible. I mean, this is really top-notch editing. Even to add to that even more, Crispin actually cuts to the shots and reactions with differing storylines too. So, you know, with the dance, with the, you know, Laenor and Rhaenyra's secret agreement, the 4 characters involved there, and then Prince Daemon's goal with being Rhaenyra, and then Queen Alicent. It's like all these things are like weaving, and I think that's what makes the scene very good at editing. And the best part about all of that is we're never lost. We're kind of like intrigued every single time. You have one storyline and then another storyline layers it, another. It's like, it's insane how well he does it. So I think, watch out for that. I think this, once the second half starts to kick in, really, really look for those editing choices. Those are really, really top notch. Again, here I just listed the 3 different storylines that are going through there. Okay, now let's move it down a little bit here. So like I said in the beginning, the dance music beats a little bit faster. Crispin edits, follow exactly the pacing that needs to be. Crispin really does a good job of matching the energy here. So there's a scene where the dance sort of brings Rhaenyra along through different people and then ends up with Prince Daemon, and they have this exchange of Prince Daemon hey, I can blah blah blah, basically sweet nothings, and just doing this sweet nothings exchange, and Rhaenyra's all right, do it, I'll go be with me for the rest of my life, blah blah blah, whatever. And the way that Crispin misdirects us to think that it's Prince Daemon who starts this fight, because we just ended on that scene, is pretty masterful. I mean, it's pretty good. Again, like I said in the beginning, we're so used to Prince Daemon being the fire starter, for anything conflict wise, and this time we're kind of confused, right? We are led to believe that it's him, but there's no evidence yet. It's just this reaction shots of everyone, kind of the crowd, King Viserys, all of the guards, everything is just so what the heck is happening? What is going on? What in the 7 hells is going on? And this is what sealed the deal for me. This scene was what sealed the deal for me for the film editing in this season. It's just, he basically does a good job of hiding it. He does a good job of being an editor who builds up tension and builds up suspense, and then punches us right as in the face once we reveal who it is. I think I did here. Did I do it? Yeah. I counted how many point of view shots and reaction shots from the time that the fight starts until the end. And 13 point of view shots and 25 reaction shots from the moment that it breaks down. That's pretty insane. 13 point of view shots and 25 reaction shots. It's interesting to break down because the majority of the scene is not even featuring the fight itself, but the tension that surrounds it. Yeah. As an editor, that's an important lesson to be learned. Less is more. Less is always more as an editor. Having the audience imagine what's happening in their head is more stimulating than telling them what's going on. Absolutely. And that's what I think Crispin does again so well. It's he realizes, he understands that when you're an audience member and you watch this, whatever you think is happening in your head is more stimulating than literally giving it to them in a silver platter and telling them what's actually happening. Because the mystery's gone, right? You watch something, you're like, whoa, what's going on, right? What's going on? It's more suspenseful. And that's why it's no secret Crispin used so much point of view and reaction shots, because that's the best way to achieve that imagine it for yourself stimulating feeling. It's true, yeah. So that's crazy. 13 point of view shots and 25 reaction shots. It's a lot of point of views and a lot of reactions there. Crispin's range as an editor is what made me chose the scene. In the first half of the wedding, we were molding, fine-tuning character performances through their subtleties and their actions, and then by the end of it, we were thrown into a frenzy with a chaotic editing pattern that mimicked the gravity of the fight. Yeah, it's really true. And I wouldn't be surprised if this entire scene single-handedly wins Crispin an Emmy Award for this episode. Yeah, let's see. I'm actually curious to know who would be nominated this year for there's a lot of good TV. I did a blog on The Last of Us. I did a blog on The Menu and Top Gun. So watch out for those videos to come soon as well, because I'll break down editing for that. I think I already broke down Top Guns, but fight scene at the wedding, here it is. I'm not going to show it because it's YouTube, but go ahead and rewatch it. It's exactly what I'm talking about. You'll see the chaotic environment and chaotic way that Crispin actually builds this up. Speaking of building tension. Let's break it down, because the way that you have to build tension, there's always a build-up there's always a something that happens beforehand, and then there's an effect, a payoff. So the payoff happens all at different parts of the scene, which when we least expect it, right? So this is what's really cool about, when you break this down. I love looking deeper into the scene and really figuring it all out. So the buildup between Rhaenyra and Cole, Sir Christian Cole, and Laenor and Joffrey's secret relationship ends with a brutal fight. That's the main one. And then you have King Viserys' Queen Alicent relationship with Queen Alicent worsens, and then the payoff ends with her interrupting a speech and wearing war green. And then King Viserys' health worsens throughout the scene, and then ends with him collapsing during the impromptu wedding. So all of these things are at play, right? All of these little nuances and details. As an editor, when you're doing this, it's all, you got to make sure you're feeding the right, the right shots in the timeline, because you gotta keep the structure here, or else if you don't have enough of one thing or another, then there's no payoff, right? So there's a cause and effect, and you have to have enough cause for the effect to pay off. These are the 3 shock factor sequences when Crispin needs to plant tiny seeds throughout the scene in order to build up to fully pay off. Like I said before, Crispin mixes in reaction shots together so that they don't necessarily belong in the same storyline. So that's his solution here, right? He basically kind of feeds you a little bit of one, feeds you another bit of one, feeds you a little bit of one, feeds you a little bit, and then goes a little bit step by step, and then explodes everything. That was sort of the structure of the scene. That way we're clocking in reactions, but it's up to us to make sense of all of it during the feast. And there's that, that tinge of leave it up to the audience's imagination, right? That's really important as a film editor, right? You got to leave some sort of mystery amongst the story so that the audience is engaged and they want to know what's happening next. They want to know what's going to happen when X happens, So it's kind of this, playful game between you and the audience. Okay, let's go over how Crispin successfully builds up tension and then pays it off later in the sequence. So for the Rhaenyra, Cole, and Laenor storyline, it's all about the cutaways that Crispin goes to. Cole or Joffrey, their shots are featured, again, like I said before, they're featured every single time we talk about the wedding or we talk about Rhaenyra. It's Christian Cole is his face, the reactions that he has. It's just clear that he's totally not okay with all of this. And then the tension is further escalated when Joffrey wants to figure out who Rhaenyra's side piece is. And once he figures that out, it's Cole, and confronts him, the tension increases even more, and that's why it ends up the way it ends up is because, Cole snapped, right? You can tell that his anger, despite him having to hold it in, you can still sense without him saying a thing, he's really not okay with this. And he's basically this, I made a metaphor here. It's like in elementary school when a friend calls you out for having a crush on someone and then promises not to tell anyone, but then with a smirk, and then that friend basically does, and he feels kind of vulnerable and compromised. So that's why he snaps, and that's why he basically just wanted to, punch Joffrey's or smash Joffrey's head onto the ground. It's dude, well, who are you? It's kind of if you put yourself in Cole's position, it's like, stop prying, stop prodding in my life, you know, like, what's your deal, bro, kind of thing. But he snaps. He like loses himself. He loses his composure. I have to assume Crispin purposely did not show Cole more explicitly angry until the fight because he wanted to be like, yeah, that's also part of the reason why I think too. It's like, we want to have this sort of surprise element. You know, we kind of thought Cole was also handling it well, but then you realize at the end that he really wasn't. You know, it's kind of that thing where we're playing sort of like even more into a character's head. Like now we see him, like we can tell that he's like super angry, but like he's holding it in, right? As an audience, like we can say he's holding it in. He would never do that. Like he would never go against his honor and like do something as crazy as this, but then he does. So that's another element. As an editor, you have to, you know, play with the audience here. You gotta like really think that you're gonna bring the audience this way, but then you actually do a little detour and surprise them. That's what makes this show exciting. Okay. This was another example of how Crispin surgically selected dailies where Cole was not outwardly angry. It's also a very good point. Like, as an editor, you have to make sure the shot selections that you pick as far as like dailies and footage goes, what, you know, are they enough to relay the specific character personalities that you're trying to portray? Are they enough to show that so that the audience is tracking it? That's next. Almost acting cool with the entire thing, but knew deep down that he was furious. Again, script breakdown by Crispin is incredibly well done. He sees beyond the dialogue and brings to life what this character feels inside. It's very true. But this quote right here, I think this thing that I wrote is, you got to see beyond the dialogue when you're editing. Again, you got to bring to life what characters feel inside versus just the basic, they're saying something and you portray it. It's great, but albeit gruesome payoff. It's true. So like I said before, the detour, surprise the audience, and you know, basically makes for an entertaining scene. And I will say, obviously, you know, everything here, this isn't all because of the editor. Obviously there's a director and writer and showrunner involved. You know, everyone has a collaborative part of it in this process. So I'm just letting you know that, you know, just because that I'm talking about the editing, I'm not discrediting everyone involved. I'm sure there's a ton of notes and a ton of direction from everyone that's from the top down. So, but just to sort of focus in on the editing and why it makes it so effective and why it's so, you know, entertaining, and the way that the scene sort of builds up. It's, you know, the assembled. It's assembled that way, and the editor really understood the notes from the directors and understood the notes from the writer, and basically had to come up with something like this. So at the end of the day, yeah, like the editor is basically doing it, but it's a collaboration of notes that he still has to filter through in order to produce something like this. The next storyline that Crispin is responsible is in building tension is for King Viserys' relationship with his queen Alicent. Note there are countless of moments in this previous episode where Alicent's relationship with the king was already rocky, so I'm just going to go over the continuation of that build-up. Yeah, so this has been a long build-up, so not just this episode, but it's been throughout the entire season up to this point where King Viserys and Queen Alicent's relationship hasn't been, you know, the best. It's been super rocky. So that is also pretty crucial, right? As an editor, you have to also understand how the story arcs from previous episodes come into your episode and how to basically bridge those personalities or those story arcs into your episode. Obviously, Crispin has to be familiar with all the other episodes and to talk with the other editors or talk with the directors, etc., etc. So to basically familiarize where he is as far as like what characters he has to sort of portray. But yeah, That's a very important note too. If you're working in television, you're not, as an editor, you're probably going to only edit probably 2 or 3 episodes out of the 8. Maybe 4. Maybe you might be the series editor, or you have a hand in all of them, but normally it's only 2 or 3. So you have to be aware of what the other episodes can do to your episode. Okay, the next first moment of build up Crispin. Okay, so we're going to talk about more in depth of this King Viserys exchange with Jason Lannister, and how that storyline sort of affected this queen relationship with King Viserys. So Jason Lannister asks, where's the queen? And sort of replies that she's getting ready, which is, it's a lie. He has no clue. So there's your first sort of build-up moment for like King Viserys' relationship with Alicent, and it's basically another weave here, because Jason replies with a backhand insult to Rhaenyra, which is another storyline of him and Rhaenyra trying to chase Rhaenyra. Again, I'd say I wrote Crispin is juggling 2 storylines here and having to pick the right performances to accommodate plot lines. But we can already infer that King Viserys has no idea where his wife is or what she's up to just by delivery of his lines. So yeah, you can also tell the performances that King Viserys has. It's usually like not confident, sort of like weak, not a strong leader kind of thing. You can tell that he's coughing, he's dealing with an ailment, so you can tell that he's on the downward spiral trend here. If Queen Alicent's relationship with King Viserys is good in terms, there would be no way that she would miss a single moment of this feast with him, let alone the entrance of the clans. Yeah, this is a huge moment. I mean, this is like when you plan a huge party for, your daughter, whatever, your stepdaughter, which is weirdly enough her best friend. Game of Thrones is so strange with this. But it's really strange. Like, let's say you plan like this huge event, and then all of a sudden you're not there when you're welcoming all of your guests. Like, you're not there when like your husband or king is like giving a speech, a welcoming speech. Like, that's not good. That's not good. And she would have made a public apology if she was like, yeah, it's my run. She would have been like, I'm sorry, guys, I was getting ready. Like, she would say sorry. She never said sorry, so she was just like reborn. Okay, the next seed of build-up was subtle, and if you look at the reaction of Crispin when Rhaenyra, sorry, I'm like losing, like I put these 2 names together. Rhaenyra and Laenor greeted each other, then Lord Corlys and Rhaenyra, we see a shot of King Viserys looking for his queen. So no, this is like a point of view shot that like you see, and then you're like, oh, that's another build-up piece, right? It's another reason why King Viserys is losing control over Queen Alicent, right? He feels left out. It's sad. He doesn't have his queen by his side. It's like it's all these like quick juxtaposition shots of King Viserys and then Lord Corlys and Rhaenys. So it's very subtle, but it pays off. Finally, the payoff catches us all off guard when Queen Alicent shows up during the middle of King Viserys' speech. There we go. Bold move, Alicent. Bold move. That's exactly what I wrote. She walks down the aisle, stone cold face, wearing a color that symbolizes war. That's the payoff. That's the payoff, where she's a different character now. She's not listening, and she's not going to take anyone else's word for anything else but herself. She's herself now. She's her leader. She's her own leader. What I've noticed too is how Crispin reveals Queen Alicent. He's fully aware this is what I was talking about a while ago. Fully aware of how to use cinematography in its fullest meaning and vision. If you rewatch the reveal, Crispin cuts to this powerful wide shot of Queen Alicent silhouetted to the crowd before we even see her actual face. It's villainous and ominous. Yeah. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You have to understand the cinematography and how it affects the story and when to use it and how to use it when you're building an assembly. So always look out for that. When you're watching films for editing, also watch for films for cinematography. Like, pause on the frame and be like, wow, what does that actually mean? Sometimes I look at really beautiful cinematography, like shots that you just see in one of those what's it, the super cool artsy magazines, or just a cool artsy photo, and you watch films that have those shots, pause it for a second and break it down and talk to yourself about it. Those are really good points to study for, because they'll help you realize why did they shoot it this way, so it's also a good thing to do for homework if you're ever wanting to learn more about shot selections and dailies and how to achieve the fullest meanings of your shots. Side notes is something to have in your toolbox. Look at the cinematography. Yep, that's exactly what I said. As an editor, it's your job to properly place them in the edit to give audiences a complete experience that support its meaning and intentions. That's what Crispin did so well in this Queen Alicent reveal. Exactly. Exactamundo. The last storyline that Crispin had to build up throughout the scene was King Viserys' health worsening. It's another surgical edit where Crispin actually had to find moments throughout the scene to place them. If you rewatch the scene, the small coughs were strategically placed. I mean, I think they were strategically placed. But again, I'm not part of the production, so I don't know. But if they weren't, then it was very, it's a great, they were very kind of subtle. They were super oh, why did he just cough there? You know what I mean? They were sort of unnoticed at first, and then it slowly built up to being oh crap, he is actually sick. There's something going on with him. I love that. I love the way that it felt so innocent at first, and then we don't even care that Viserys just coughed. It's just a normal occurrence. That's what when I first saw this, I was oh, that's weird that they he just coughed. All right, cool. I didn't really feel anything was wrong, but then you start to realize that it led to a nosebleed and an eventual payoff at the end after all the chaos to him collapsing during the wedding. It's oh crap, okay, he is sick. So that's also a good editing lesson to learn. It's being able to build up something super slowly, and then well, not super slowly, but sort of on an arc. Just so that it's not so out of nowhere. You don't want to throw your audience in front of a bus, because it's crazy. It's just it's out of nowhere, and it just feels unwarranted. You have to make sure that there's enough evidence to have a successful payoff. Though I wonder if the coughs Crispin placed were already scripted in, or if he placed them in during the edit. Yeah, that's what I was actually about to question too, is was there a note that they needed more coughs, or was this actually written? I'm curious to know as far as how he built this up, because coughing is, you could basically put it anywhere, if you're editing this. So those were the three storylines that Crispin had to build up and pay off. It's pretty remarkable to watch because everything happens so fast, and everything is heavily intertwined with each other. I can only imagine editing all this together and perfecting it over and over again with subtle, fine-tuned editing to come with a scene. What a great episode. It indeed was a great episode. Look beyond dialogue. This is, again, what I was saying before. Characters are gonna give you nonverbal language that means something completely different to what they say. So, in a show like House of Dragon, you must look past the dialogue when watching the show. The reason why I love this scene for editing so much is because Crispin communicates the truth to us through characters' actions rather than what they say. And that's why when you cut to a reaction on this show, you have to really think about the non-verbal language it's giving to the audience. As an editor, you have to ask yourself, does this reaction align with that specific character's motives and backstory? I love this. This is my favorite paragraph in my blog. It's the beauty of editing here. It's being able to break down a story, break down a scene, and really look for characters' motives, a character's performances, and understand that when you see a dialogue that that person is saying, you know that that person's saying it in order to achieve a different thing. It's basically figuring out the lie in the scene. I can only imagine the amount of work Crispin had to go through to get this scene right. With so many stories at play, he had to make sure that the characters are pointing to their truest intentions and their nonverbal behavior. Yeah. Also, I'm sure on a show with talented actors, Crispin had probably so many different options in their performances, and that's when editing becomes so challenging, because you have all these talented actors who basically can give you a different emotion. They're not necessarily wrong. They're all the same. No, sorry. They're not necessarily wrong. They're all giving you specific emotions or specific performances so that in the editing room, the director can say, hey, I actually like Rhaenyra's, annoyed look. Hey, I actually like Rhaenyra's confident look. Hey, I actually like Rhaenyra's confused look. Those are all that's what actors do very well. They'll give you 5 different options of a performance, but it's you as an editor to understand how to get those performances and pick those performances and put it all together so that it all supports the story. That's why editing is hard. Actors do a good job of, when you have a good actor, you have an actor who can give you the same scene but in 10 different ways, or in 5 different ways, in however many ways that they can give it to you, because it's up to us as the editor to basically play with those performances. So let's go through it. Like, this is an example that I came up with. Say in that scene, Rhaenyra and Jason Lannister, when, that eye roll scene that I was talking about, Rhaenyra eye rolls before he walks up, we have several options in the dailies footage. Let's say Rhaenyra fake smiles. Greets Jason with a staying poised but fake happy to see him. She fake smiles. Like, that's one option. The second option is Rhaenyra stays cold-faced. Makes him feel less than her, intentionally, and ignores looking at him. That's another one. And then the third one is Rhaenyra acting afraid of Jason and wants her father to get him away from her. It's a third one. And then I wrote, what's crazy is that they're all actually in line and in true with Rhaenyra's character. You can literally put any of these takes in and they'll all make sense. But if you dig deeper, what are we looking for, though? This is where the director and editor have a lot of conversation, because the editor wants to know, direction-wise, what are we trying to achieve here, right? Like, what do we want to feel when we look at Rhaenyra after Jason Lannister gives his whole spiel? Like, what are we supposed to feel? Director goes, I feel like she's over him. I feel like she's kind of past this point where, like, he's now like a little peasant to me. Like, he's my little, like, I don't know, this, like, really annoying friend who just won't stop, flirting with me. It's like kind of like that's sort of the feeling that the director will say to the editor. So now the editor will go through the performance and now look through and, like, how do we get that emotion that my director just said, and how do I portray that with the performances that she delivered? So the part that Crispin now has to do, which is how do you decide which take fits best, right? He has to look beyond the dialogue and has to have a really strong grasp of what the story is. So you start to dig at the script. This is additional, right? Like, of course, like the conversation with the director that I just had, that's also important. But, like, if you look at the script first, because normally you would have an assembly first before the director comes in, but this is sort of out of order the way I just said it. But going through the script, what is the relationship between her and Jason? Well, in previous episodes, Claire doesn't like him and would rather stay single than considering him a suitor. So the fact that he's showing that he's a better suitor again shows that he's not getting the hint. Can't accept, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's all basically what I was just saying. Like, Rhaenyra is done. Like, she is done. She just doesn't care for him anymore. So knowing this, I would use a mix of reactions from take 1 and take 2, which is take 1 and take 2, Rhaenyra fake smiles, greets Jason while staying poised and confident, fake happy smile, but then you have a stone-faced kind of look, makes him feel less intentional, kind of like, dude, get over me. Just move on. Just, like, get over me. So if you add the third in, it doesn't make any sense, right? Now with our context, now with our homework, now with this explanation and the explanation that the director gave us, this does not make sense. So you can completely rule take 3 out, right? This is out. I think I wrote that there. Yeah, knowing this, I would use a mix of reactions, take 1 and take 2. Mixture of her staying poised and strong, but also giving him the coldest looks, being fake, happy to see him kind of thing. But also having her straight up cold to him. That's the truest of intentions that we have for Rhaenyra. But what's interesting is that take 3 starts to look like it's the wrong choice, right? It's basically what I said. It's just, why would Rhaenyra act afraid or submissive to Jason in this moment? It just doesn't make sense. So, you actually change the storyline and possibly infer to the audience another good intention, which is not good. You infer another intention that's completely irrelevant to the story, and that's why you have to, as an editor, understand where you are as far as characters go, because you could essentially be picking the wrong performances. So that's what it's like. Crispin goes through hundreds of times per day when he cuts this, believe it or not. Make these decisions that we just explained right now. I just explained what goes in, an editor's head and editor's thinking when you're going through a scene like this. And these are the questions. These are the questions you ask yourself, when you edit performances and you're perfecting all the little nuances. That's what editing is all about. It's not just montage. It's not putting things together. It's not, continuity. It's literally this performances and picking them. They're so important. They're really important. And I can't stress that enough. When you're an editor, if you want to get into Hollywood editing, this is what it's all about. It's perfecting those performances. It's perfecting how you can build up something and then pay it off later, and then making sure everything tracks as an audience. We've reached the end. I'm just hitting a little bit over an hour. If you're still watching, thank you so much for hanging in there with me and going through all of this. I really enjoyed actually doing this. This is actually really fun. I'm going to get my my arrows thing to work. Well, not the arrow. There's another thing. I haven't really used it, but there's a feature where I can what's it called? I can spotlight. There we go. Oh, it's only on the other. How do I spotlight on? Anyway, I'll figure it out. But I got the arrows working, which is kind of cool. I didn't really use it. I think I used the highlighter more. But arrows are cool. But yeah, so in conclusion, the biggest lesson here is to break down the script to find the character's true intentions and motives. What I mean by that is go through each scene and write a little summary of each character's true intentions so you can understand everything fully. A lot of editors do this, before they even start working. A lot of editors call, what they call character breakdowns or script breakdowns, where they basically go through each scene and, basically find out the character's motivations and see what they're really after in their story. If a character says drink the wine, that could mean, I've said this in a lot of my social media if you're following, but I love this. If a character says drink the wine, that could mean he is offering, helping, and being accommodated, or it could mean that he's trying to poison him. You have to know which one he means, because this will influence your shot selections. Again, drink the wine could mean celebrate, hospitality, or it could mean you're going to murder someone. So, especially in this show. Another lesson to learn is how to build up tension and then pay it off. Again, like I said, you're planting seeds for the audience and then hitting them with the eventual payoff. So sure, this might all be scripted already, but you are in charge of finding the right performance that correlates to the right gauge of where you are in the story. That's important. Oh wow, I go into more detail. I wrote a lot in this blog. I'm almost there. For instance, Crispin chooses a more angrier performance for Sir Christian Cole in his exchange with Joffrey. We wouldn't have been surprised at the payoff. We actually would have knew once there was commotion that it was. Yeah, so I was saying, Christian Cole. There's a scene where he actually kind of snaps at him a little bit, right? Like you can tell, he's a little bit angry, and I think as far as the build-up goes, there was scenes where he was kind of just subdued, holding it back, and then he starts to build up to the detour where he chooses a more angrier performance. So that's the difference. It's a difference of being able to build up something and then pay it off. And this is what editors and directors chat about during their edits. So if you're ever wondering when editors talk to directors in their editing sessions, it's all about this. It's all about performances. It's all about story structure. It's all about assembling the edit, building up, paying off, all the stuff that we talked about today. And then lastly, cinematography. Study cinematography, everyone. They're very helpful. It will come in handy a lot of the times when you see a really cool shot and you want to use it and you want to show it off as far as your edit goes. And the combination of it looking cool, the combination of it, having a meaning to it, like the silhouette shot behind Queen Allison, makes it more artistic and creative. Well, I hope you got a lot out of this blog. I got a lot out of this blog just by going over it and learned something new. So if you enjoy my content, guys, please subscribe, like the comment, or like the video. Trying to reach as much film editors out there, spread sort of my channel, and hopefully help people break into this industry. If you are interested in learning more about Hollywood film editing and want to pursue it as a career, I do have a one-on-one mentorship program. Go to my website and you can schedule an appointment with me there, and we can sort of break it down and figure out your path. Thanks again for hanging out. I really appreciate you staying all the way through this hour and 16 minutes now, I think. It's been fun. I think I'm going to do more of these lives. So if you also have a favorite scene from House of the Dragon and you want to share it with me, put it in the comments. I'd love to hear what your favorite scene was, because there was a ton of good editing in this show, so definitely let me know. I'll also be doing more Fonz's Favorite Frame live soon. I had a blog on The Last of Us, so I think that might be next, or The Menu. I did Top Gun, but not on a live broadcast, so you can check out the video on that. But thanks again for hanging out. I really appreciate it, guys, and I will chat with you soon. Peace.